Hello and welcome back to A View from Brussels. My name is Sonia Romano from the Water Post EU, and I'm delighted to have here with me today Federica Sabbati, Secretary General of the European Heating Industry. Thank you, Federica, for being here with us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
To give our audience a little bit of a background, Federica leads the European manufacturing industry that provides the modern heating technologies essential for decarbonizing how we heat buildings, from heat pumps to green gas appliances. She has also a strong background in European policy, having served as the Secretary General of the Liberal International ALDE Party. Federica, with such a broad and diverse background, I'd like to start asking you, what first drew you to energy, to EU energy and industrial policy, and how has your role evolved as the sector has transformed?
So, very interesting question. How does somebody with a general background like me end up in politics, in energy policy? Actually, it's very interesting topic. It's very central to the economy of a country. It's very central to particularly, these periods. We have seen in the past 5 years, 6 years, the European Commission going full speed on an energy transition that touches all sectors, from the energy sector to the manufacturing sector, industry. And I think that diving deep into these topics, also as a person interested in politics and in geopolitics, it's actually where it all happens. So that was not maybe the natural development, but it has certainly been a very interesting one.
Right. And as a European Heating Industry Secretary General, you often note how challenging it is to decarbonize heating in existing buildings. So what do you think is the biggest challenges the EU still faces, and how is the European heating industry address it?
So what is interesting, I think, is that the building sector seems to be something either very technical or very, distant from geopolitical issues, from economic issues, but it is very central, particularly to the energy transition. And today, and I think this is a number that everybody knows by now, is about 40% the energy consumption that comes from buildings. And most of our buildings are old. They are heated with appliances that are very inefficient. They're based on fossil fuels. And so the challenge there is still there, particularly for the existing building. New buildings are much easier because there's codes for building them in a energy efficient way with materials that are sustainable. The developments there have gone very fast, but for existing building, you still have a lot of difficulties. And I think one of the major one is really to realize that this is a very complex sector to decarbonize. Yeah. And it's not something that's going to happen in 1 or 2 years.
All right, I see your point. And looking ahead, which low-emission technologies do you think will truly make a difference for Europe's climate and industry goals, and why?
So we see that buildings are very different in Europe. You have, a big skyscraper, you have a small villa, you have the cottage, you have the little house in Sicily. They are all very different. And what we see as sectors is that there is no single solution that will work for all of this varied building stock. So industry has been developing a lot of different technologies that could work in every type of building. We see certainly a future for electric heat pumps, because this is a technology that's very efficient. It's certainly the long term one of the ones where industry is investing a lot and is betting actually a lot. But we see also for today's varied building stock, hybrids as an interesting solution, because this transition from mainly gas-based systems to completely electricity-based systems can be difficult for many households. And so hybrids is something that we are seeing growing in a number of countries. Italy, our country, is certainly an example of those, and therefore it's something that is probably able to make that transition a bit more easy for customers, for consumers, for people like me and you.
Yeah, I understand that. And heat pumps have significant potential to reduce emissions and improve energy efficiency in line with the EU's climate and energy goals. So from your point of view, what are the main barriers to their large-scale deployment today, and what should the EU do to unlock their full potential?
So heat pumps are definitely a solution that is going to turn around the energy efficiency of many buildings in Europe. There are, I think, at the moment still two major barriers to their full deployment. The first one is the cost of energy, today, in particular electricity. So heat pumps work with electricity. Electricity prices in Europe are still pretty much across all European countries too high to actually make a business case for consumers. So if I invest in a heat pump, then I want to see my bills, energy bills at the end of the month, being also lower than the previous less efficient appliance that I had. So the cost of energy, and particularly the difference in the cost of electricity versus gas, is still a big barrier. The second one linked to the price is the initial investment. It's still a technology that costs, or the installation of it is a barrier for many customers. So those two elements, which would be basically the CapEx and the OpEx, have to be tackled because these are barriers to today's full deployment of these technologies, which is very promising technology otherwise.
I understand, thank you. And now switching to a different topic. With the Clean Industrial Deal now being implemented, expectations are very high. What do you hope it will deliver for industry, and what kind of support or enabling conditions do you expect from the EU to stay competitive and climate compatible?
So this is why it's interesting to work in this sector, because we are, moving from energy policy to industrial policy, and this is perhaps something that wasn't looked at very strongly in the previous mandate of this Commission. But Clean Industrial Deal is something that we are looking at to maybe fill some gaps of the policies before. Our industry, but I think across Europe, manufacturing industry is actually competitive already. What we need to have is a level playing field with players outside of the European Union. So and here there are some hiccups. There are some policies that were well intended from the Commission, that have actually led to an unfair, in a way, or not competitive environment for our technology. I'll just mention one because it's been discussed these days. That's a carbon border adjustment mechanism. This is basically a tax that is put on the import of certain materials like steel. So if you import steel in Europe, you would pay a certain tax. But if you import a finished product that is made of steel produced outside of Europe, if you import the product, then you would not have to pay that tax, which means that it is more convenient to manufacture a product with steel, for example, outside of the European Union than inside, because outside the European Union there are not the same standards of environmental sustainability than there are in Europe. And this is something that needs to be regularized, and it's part of the package of the Clean Industrial Deal. That's one point. The second point, I think, in general, is seeing that products made in Europe can and should be rewarded for being made in Europe.
I agree.
Having said that, this is very complex policy choice, because we need to realize that the supply chain for a number of sectors, including our sector, is not only European, because the world was very different until a few months ago. So the value chain is international, and we need to make sure that when we choose certain policy options, that we are not creating some roadblocks for manufacturers. So it's very complex, but it's a very interesting moment for industry to keep being competitive on the international seen on the international environment, but with the right policies.
Okay, thank you, Federica. And in practice, the transition needs major public and private investments. When do you see the biggest, where do you see the biggest investment gaps in your sector?
Again, this is a very fragmented sector, meaning that there's many millions of individual decisions that have to be made, and making sure that that every individual investor has the means to do it, perhaps by helping it with public incentives, is where we need to look at. And that's of course very complex because we're talking about many millions of individual decisions. But still, going back to the heat pumps and the barriers to heat pumps, let's say the first investment is what counts, and therefore supporting consumers into that investment is important.
Okay, so you kind of answered my next question about how Europe can make sure consumers and companies adopt low emission solutions, which is investing more. So I'll go to the next question, more about the workforce. Skills and installers are often overlooked, yet essential. What needs to change to ensure Europe has the skilled workforce required to deliver the heating transition at scale?
So it's certainly about education. We need to upgrade our curricula already at education, the sort of school level. Even attracting more girls and women to the sector, and making sure that the development of the studies matches also what is happening on the ground and the development of the technological level. And bear in mind that we really need to attract many new people, because the installers profession at the moment sees less and less people coming to work in that sector. And the average installer today is 50-year-old and has always installed gas boilers rather than heat pumps. So for that transition to happen, we really need to have a change in pace, attract new people, and train those that are in the profession now to the new technologies.
Okay, thank you. And last question. The EU has set ambitious 2040 targets, yet didn't join the global fossil fuel phase-out roadmap at COP30. In your view, is the EU on track to meet its 2040 goals while keeping global credibility?
So certainly for the building sector, I don't think Europe is on track. If we see if we see the figures for the sales of efficient technologies, we are very far from the targets that we have set. So as Europe, so going back to how to get there, we really need to make sure that we work on the electricity prices, specifically on energy prices, that they need to be more affordable. That we work on also on awareness, consumer awareness of, you need to replace your old heating system because the new one will make you save money and will be better for the environment. And we need to make sure that we can help, and when I say we, I mean broadly speaking, governments with the right incentives, stable incentives that help making that first investment into that direction. And if we don't do that, and this has to happen now, then it's going to be very difficult to reach the 2040 and certainly the 2050 targets that we have set for ourselves as Europe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, Federica, very much for being here today. And thank you, everyone listening to us from home. This is Sonia Romano from the Water Post EU, and see you at the next episode of A View from Brussels.